Gentlemen, what is going on today? My name is Ryan Mickler, and I am the host and the founder of this podcast and the movement that is Order of Man. I want to welcome you here to your Friday Field Notes. I've got a good one lined up for you today. Now, I think all the Friday Field Notes are good, mostly because it's me. And I tend to think highly of my thoughts, although I do recognize and acknowledge that I get a lot of things wrong from time to time. Anyways, if you're returning, welcome. Glad you're back. If you're new, welcome. Glad you're here. This is a resource designed to give you the tools, the conversations, the equipment, the information, everything that you might need to thrive and succeed as a husband, a father, a business owner, a leader in your community, a man in general. So we do that by having some great podcast guests. I've got some good ones lined up. Stephen Pressfield is coming on the podcast. Matt Frazier is coming on the podcast. Mark Manson, author of The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F and Everything is F'd, is going to be released next week. So we've got dozens more. So make sure you subscribe so you do not miss a single episode. Now, one thing I want to ask before I get into this Friday Field Notes is for you to go to the website. Go to orderofman.com. And what I need you to do is subscribe on the bottom, on the footer of the website, or the pop-up or a sidebar, wherever it comes up, subscribe to get our emails. And the reason I want you to do this is because what I'm going to talk with you about today, which is victory and how to define victory, is part of a series that I'm putting together that will be available in 2 weeks. It's free, no cost to you. And the goal is to give you the information and a couple of resources that you need to be ready for battle, ready for whatever life has to throw at you inside of your marriage and your career and your finances and your fitness and everything else that you're dealing with. So again, go to orderofman.com, subscribe to get those emails, or follow us on Instagram or Twitter, both at Ryan Mickler, and I'll make sure I give you the update when this thing is available, which is going to be about 2 weeks. So I'm pulling this information today from part of that course. And what it is and what I wanted to talk with you about today is the idea of victory. Now, what is victory? We're going to talk about strategies and tactics and everything that you can do to achieve victory. And we've been talking about that for 5 years. But I want to back up because it's very easy to get into the strategies and tactics that we need to employ in order to be victorious. But I think where a lot of men fall behind is they fail to define victory in the first place. I was in the military, and in 2005 and 2006, I was in Ramadi, Iraq, and it was a fulfilling time. It was a meaningful time for me. I felt proud of my service and to be able to do what I think generally was a good thing. But there was some sticking points, some points of frustration for me, and part of that was an inability to define what victory looks like. And I think this is part of the reason that we're still in the Middle East is because we never defined what victory looks like. And I realize there's some factors that make it challenging when we're talking about foreign wars and conflicts and all of this in our foreign policy. But if you can't define a victory, I got to question whether or not you should get in the fight to begin with. But it's interesting because a lot of us do the very same thing in other facets and avenues of our life. Like if you think about it, for example, if I were to ask 100 men today, what is it that you'd want out of life? I think all 100 of them would likely say, I don't know, I want to make a little bit more money, have a little more sex, have some experiences, have some money in the bank account, have a six-pack abs, and just be like happy. And while all of that stuff is fine and great, it isn't quantifiable enough. It isn't specific enough. It isn't articulated to the point where you can actually achieve it. Let's just take the money thing, for example. If you said, well, I want to make more money this year than I made last year, are you telling me that if you made $1 more this year in 2020 than you made in 2019, you'd be satisfied? Of course you wouldn't. If you look at it in the context of a relationship, if you said, I just want to have a good relationship, I want to be connected with my wife or have a better relationship, are you telling me that if you and her yelled at each other one less time than you did last week, that you would qualify that as a successful marriage? Of course you wouldn't. And yet we do this all of the time. We fail to get precise. We fail to articulate clearly what victory looks like. And then as we go about our daily activities and our duties, and then we eventually look back at our life and wonder, why didn't I accomplish all that I wanted to accomplish? Well, I would argue that a big part of that is because you failed to identify what victory looked like in the first place. And that is the first mistake that we make when it comes to accomplishing big things in our lives. I mean, I can't even tell you how often I talk with men who say they want a good life and say they want money and want to start a business and want to do this and want to do that. And then when you probe just a little bit, like what exactly does that mean? All you hear is crickets. They cannot articulate clearly what they want. So what I'm doing today, guys, is I'm challenging you right now to begin to get very, very specific and use the three factors that I'm going to share with you today to be able to get crystal clear on what you want, which will set you up for other activities down the road that we'll talk about in the course we're putting together and on this podcast as well. All right, so let's get into it. The first factor that you need to consider as you are defining what victory looks like for you is that it needs to be precise. It needs to be precise. If you say, I want to make more money, you should instead say, I want to make this much more money. I want to make $10,000 in the next 90 days. I want to make $50,000 more this year than I did last year. Too many men don't qualify it. And I think part of the reason a lot of guys don't qualify and get specific and precise with what they want is because they want to give themselves a little bit of wiggle room just in case they fail to meet their standard or their expectation. Right? If you say, hey, I just want to make more money, and you make $1 more like I talked about earlier, I guess technically you can say you hit your goal or you hit your objective, but are you really that much better off than you were a year before? No, of course you're not any better off. But we do it to give ourselves that wiggle room, to give ourselves space for a retreat, just in case we don't live up to the expectation that we have of ourselves. So the first point in clearly defining and articulating what victory looks like is to be very precise with your language. I want to make $10,000 more. If you're talking about happiness in a relationship, what does that mean? Does that mean you want to have more sex? Does that mean you want to have more conversations? Does that mean you want to go on more dates? It's probably all three, and that's good. That's good to know, but you've got to articulate it because what we focus on and what we give our attention is what we achieve. So if you're precise, then the world is going to give you that. If you're loose with it and you're using cryptic language and you're trying to give yourself some wiggle room, then there's a lot of play in what the world is willing to give you based on your actions. So as you're going through and listening to this podcast today, if you're in a position where you can write something down, then do that. If not, you can come back to this later and check it out. But I want you to start writing down as clearly as you possibly can the things that you want out of your life by using precise, measurable, objective data and information that is actually achievable, I should say, that you can actually accomplish, not just be happier. Because what the hell does that even mean? I don't know what that means. And it's likely if you're using that kind of verbiage that you don't know what it means either, which is part of the problem. All right. Number 2, it needs to be possible. If you told me that, hey, Ryan, I'm 200 pounds overweight and I want to lose 200 pounds in 90 days. That's wonderful. I can appreciate the initiative and the ambition, but it's not possible. And if you're doing that and setting yourself up with a false expectation of the way this is going to go down, then you're going to start feeling like a failure. You're not going to achieve your objective because it's not possible, and you're going to start feeling like a failure, and then you're going to feel guilty about feeling that way about yourself and not accomplishing what you want, and it's just this negative downward cycle that you have put yourself into. So make sure that the thing is actually possible. Now, here's the challenge. I can't tell you what the line is between possible and impossible. You have to define that for yourself. But what I would tell you is that line is found somewhere around being nervous and maybe even scared and getting that heart pumping and that heart racing a little bit when you think about what you actually want to accomplish. There's been things in my life from my physical fitness goals, like completing a Spartan Agoge, for example, running a marathon. There's things there that, make me a little bit nervous. And that's a good thing. That means that it's meaningful, it's significant, it's challenging enough where it will compel and drive you to train, to practice, to get yourself ready for that objective you want to accomplish. On the other side of that is it shouldn't be demoralizing. Like when you think about what it is you want to accomplish and you think, oh man, I just can't do this. This is impossible, so I'm not even going to try. Obviously, that's a problem. So the line between impossibility and possibility is found between being worried and a little fearful about what you want to accomplish because it's big and it's bold and it's audacious, and being demoralizing and not getting you on the track that you want to go. So we've got number one, it's got to be precise. Number two is it's got to be possible. And number three, it's got to be pertinent. It has to be pertinent. What does it need to be pertinent to? Your vision. Your vision for yourself. And we're going to talk about this in this course. I'm going to talk about it later, but suffice it to say right now that if you don't have a vision for yourself, that you don't know the kind of person you want to be, the kind of husband that's connected with his wife, the kind of father that's leading his children, the kind of member of the community who's leading and who's looked up to and has influence and authority and credibility in the community and with your neighbors, if you haven't thought about these things, you really need to think about these things. Because when times get tough and there's uncertainty and doubt and confusion and frustration and a lot of chaos and unknown in the world, you're not going to drive forward unless you know exactly what you want, why you want it, why it's so compelling. It's got to be emotionally charged, something that excites you, that fires you up, that gets you motivated, that gets you passionate, that gets you out of bed, that keeps you driving on in the face of challenge and adversity. These are the things that you need to think of first. Because now when we're talking about specifically the objectives that you want to accomplish, it has to be pertinent to that vision. If you're doing objectives and you're setting things up that you want to accomplish based on what somebody else is doing or what you think you quote unquote should be doing by other people's standards, you're not going to remain engaged in the battle because it isn't important to you. It doesn't matter to you. It's got to matter. It's got to be relevant. It's got to be pertinent to what you want to accomplish specifically. And when you work backwards by creating that vision into something that's pertinent, you'll begin to see that when it gets challenging and demanding and tough and difficult, that you won't kowtow, that you won't run away from it and retreat like potentially you have in the past, but that you'll step into the adversity, that you'll step up to the plate and you'll drive on in the face of what normally would keep you back and derail you from accomplishing the things that you want to accomplish. Guys, I firmly believe that because we don't have these factors in play when we think about what we want, this is why we fail. This is why we fall short. One of the reasons anyways. So as you're thinking about your life and the things that you've accomplished, and in this context, the things that you haven't accomplished, I want you to consider, have your objectives been in alignment with these three factors? And if they haven't, now's the perfect time to start shoring them up, to start getting to a place where you can say yes and you can check off these factors and you can create objectives that are actually going to drive you forward, that are going to produce results that you're after. So let me tell you again what they are. Again, I want you to get a notepad out or an app on your computer or your phone or whatever and write these things down. If you're not in the position where you can do that right now, you can do that when you get back and come back and listen. Okay, but the three factors are, number one, it's got to be precise. Get as specific as you possibly can, and be precise with your language and your wording. Don't be cryptic. Don't give yourself wiggle room. Don't use weird words or jargon that doesn't really mean anything. Be very, very precise with what you're saying. Number two, make sure that it's possible, that it's found in the space between I'm nervous and worried about this thing and I'm demoralized in thinking about even attempting to accomplish this thing. There's a space in there, and you've got to find out what that space is. And the third component is that it's got to be pertinent. It's got to be pertinent to your vision, pertinent to you. When you think about it, it's got to charge you, it's got to drive you, it's got to compel you, because when things get challenging, you want to make sure that it's relevant, that it will keep you engaged in the battle. And it does need to be a battle that you stay engaged in. All right? That's all I've got for you. Again, 2 resources. Number one, go to orderofman.com. Sign up for the email newsletter, because when this comes available in 2 weeks, this course that we're putting together, again, it's free. It's all available to you. You're going to be the first to know about it. And the second is, it's just listening to this. As I said, there's two resources. It's just that one. So just go to that one and continue to stay subscribed to the podcast, because we've got some powerful information, powerful interviews, and I'm going to be doing more of these, talking about this exact subject. All right, so make sure you check it out. Appreciate you guys being in this battle with me. I hope that these 3 factors serve you and that you'll take it to heart and you'll implement what it is we're talking about, because I know as I have, it's drastically improved the results that I've experienced in my life. All right, guys, we're going to call it a day. We'll be back next week again with Mark Manson, author of The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F and Everything is F'd. You guys are really, really going to enjoy that conversation, so make sure you subscribe, and we will see you then. Until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.